Welcome back to another episode of Starving Artist with LJ Jones. Thank you to every single one of you from the bottom of my heart who had the opportunity to listen to last week's episode. The feedback has been amazing. All right, so thank you guys so much. And I have an episode 2 here lined up that I believe you will all love just as much. But before I get to that, if you don't already follow us on social media, please do so. You can find us at SA with LJ and give us all the feedback you got. We're just beginning. This is just the start. There's a lot of room to grow, and I'm very eager to do so, okay? So, without further ado, please join us as we venture off to where the hills are alive with the sound of music. Sorry, I had to do it. I'm not even sorry. I had to sing that, okay? So, without further ado, Christine-Wiley, I had the opportunity to see her perform as Maria in the Sound of Music National Tour, and I told her in the episode, man, she made me cry. She was honestly the best Maria I've ever seen. Julie Andrews, she's great. She's wonderful. She's a queen. But Jill Christine-Wiley, she might have done it better. It's just the truth. In this episode, we talk about how she got her start as a child actor in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. We talk about her growing up and doing various different shows. We talk about her going to college and leaving college for the Beauty and the Beast National Tour. We talk about her time on the Sound of Music National Tour. And we talk about how coronavirus has affected her professional life, and how ready she is for this all to be over with so she can get back to doing what she loves.
Everybody's aiming for the top, trying to make it before all your time is up. We stay up on the grind all day non-stop.
Welcome back to another episode of Starving Artist. I'm LJ Jones, and I have a very, very exciting episode today. I'd like to welcome to the show the beautiful and incredibly talented Jill Christine-Wiley. Hey, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for hopping on.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, LJ, and I'm glad we connected.
I know. Let me tell you, I saw you in Clearwater when Sound of Music was here.
Yeah.
And you were wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Was that full set? Did you get to see our full set with the staircase and all
yes.
of the wonderful? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a few instances that it didn't always happen, so that makes my heart very happy.
The Sound of Music has always been one of my favorites. I remember I saw the film in high school. My literature teacher wanted to show it to us. So I think I was in like 9th or 10th grade, and I loved it ever since. And that was my first time to see it live. And can I tell you the truth?
Let's hear it.
I cried. I'm emotional. It got me. It got me. I loved it. You were great. Everybody was great. Everybody was wonderful. So when I started, when I had the idea for this podcast, I came up with a list of like my top 5 people, and you were in that top 5.
Wow, thank you so much. That's very lovely, and you don't ever. Oftentimes with these tours, it's rare that we get to interact with our audience members and hear their feedback and just actually have candid conversation and get in depth. So this is a really exciting opportunity, and thanks for thinking of me.
Of course, absolutely. So every podcast, I like to start off asking, where are you from, and what was that moment for you when you realized that you wanted to act for the rest of your life?
Sure. So I'm from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Amish County, famous whoopie pies. If you've ever had a whoopie pie, not to be missed. And I grew up in a very musical household. My dad is a professor of music and has taught jazz musicians for years. He's a trumpet player. He's actually retiring at the end of this year, which is pretty crazy. So it's been a crazy journey for all of us. And I grew up going to band rehearsals and sitting in the theater of wherever he was hosting for his college bands. And I had a lot of free time on my hands. So I remember listening to the different music that they were playing, and they would be rehearsing. So they would go back time and time again. And as they went around, I went going on creating my dance choreography and coming up with dance routines in the aisles, and went to a few concerts here and there, but it was mostly a lot of musical Broadway soundtracks. I grew up on Music Man and Annie and King and I, different classics and the Rodgers and Hammerstein, and we always had the VHS tapes as well. And in Lancaster, I will say that the arts are very alive and thriving. So from community theaters, touring venues, regional theaters, you name it. I mean, there were so many outlets for me as a child, and even more today now, which is pretty incredible. So it was a very early age that I decided I wanted to do a play, and I had no idea what a musical was, and I was a little unsure about that. And I auditioned for a dinner theater here, the Dutch Apple Dinner Theater. And it was for a musical adaptation of the Christmas film Miracle on 34th Street.
Yeah.
And I was cast as, in the movie, it's a girl who is deaf, and she interacts with Santa, and he does ASL with her and communicates with her. And in the musical, it's a girl who speaks Dutch. And so we sing a little duet with Santa. It was very endearing. And after the show closed, I just was like, Mom, when can I do another musical? And instead of summer camp, it was theater camp or summer shows. And oftentimes I would go between school and rehearsals, or leaving school middle of the day and having to stay up on my academics to go and do a show at a regional theater. And I was a working child actor in my hometown, and I just grew up on stage, truly. I mean, I would go from childhood conversations to then going and having to have adult interaction conversations as a kid. So it matured me and it groomed me for this career from a very young age. So I'm very fortunate to be from here and to have come from such a great background.
That's so exciting. I mean, I remember we were talking before we started recording. I got my first professional job when I was 11 at a dinner theater also. I played Nathan Lukowski in The Full Monty, and which is a very adult show as is.
Yes.
But it was the same. Like we did shows. We did a matinee on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and then so I was leaving school to go do the show, and so I could definitely identify with that. I actually had the opportunity to have the director of that show on this podcast. So we got to talk about that production and stuff like that. So that's it's really exciting. I feel like I can identify with you on that. So what other, coming from after doing your first show, what were some of the other shows that you had the opportunity to do?
So tag teaming on to Sound of Music, that was a show that has revisited my journey through this industry throughout the years. I then auditioned for a community theater production and I got cast as Marta in The Sound of Music.
Wow.
And that experience and that summer, I still have memories of, and doing the quick changes as a Von Trapp child and being up on stage rehearsing and just looking up at Maria, just thinking she was the most beautiful and talented Maria there ever was, and which led to a few years later her then becoming my voice teacher as a child. Wow. And I studied with her because I wanted to grow up to be a singer like she was. And I was first introduced to musical theater, I guess, also in regards to my dad's jazz bands and whatnot. But my mom took me to my high school alma mater to see the school spring musical, which was The Sound of Music. And I was preschool, pre-kindergarten. So we didn't know if it would last, if I would make it through an almost 3-hour-long show as it is. Yeah. And apparently I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. And so seeing Maria, seeing the kids up on stage, that for me was kind of this moment of, I can do what they're doing. That's just no fear whatsoever. The idea of being up in front of people, I wanted to jump up on that stage. So when I had the opportunity at 8 or 9 years old to then play Marta, I was just right in my element and was just a sponge soaking it all up. And from there it was, Mom, can you find a place for me to take dance classes? Is there a place that is doing a summer camp? And it was just anytime there were local children auditions, we were in the know and we were having to go. And I was doing homework in the back seat with a flashlight, late night, driving home from rehearsal or a show. And I had the opportunity as a kid to originate a role for what was to have been a hopeful Broadway production of A Little Princess. We are all familiar with that movie, and I got to play Sarah Carew in a musical adaptation and meet the director. And I think it was about that time frame that I realized this was serious for me. And I think I was about 10, 11, maybe 12 years old at the time. And you very quickly in this industry as a child, when you are so dedicated to it, you set goals and bucket list roles. And so Annie was on there, and I actually never got to play the role of Annie. I was Tessie 3 different times, and I understudied Annie once, and I got to go on. It was just, as a child, so many different shows are done, and you revisit these different shows and different productions, and you grow within them. So which led to being a teenager, I guess, if I can just continue speaking about it.
Of course.
And then transitioning out of the kid roles into the more, well, you can be in the adult ensemble, and that is carrying a weight of its own and responsibility, as you're expected the same of these adult actors that are hired from New York City, and you have to step up to the plate and prove yourself. And having the opportunity to understudy different roles and understudy supporting leads as a 17-year-old, I mean, it's a big responsibility. But again, that sponge mentality of, I just want to do this. And I remember being in my very first show asking the adult actors, just trying to comprehend, like, this is your job, you do this for a living. Well, what did you go to school for? Because you have to learn how to do this. How did you get better? And they said, well, I got my BFA in musical theater. And so I came home that night after the show and said, Mom, Dad, I'm going to be a musical theater major one day. And the rest is kind of history from there. So
that's amazing. And you went to Pace, right? Pace University?
Yes. So I was a musical theater major there. And I was at Pace from my freshman year to the end of my sophomore year. And while there, we were permitted to audition if we felt that that was something we wanted to explore. And there was a touring production of Disney's Beauty and the Beast that had been out for about 3 years already and was continuing on. And it was my freshman year that I decided to wake up at 4 a.m. and hop on the subway with a few of my friends and go sign an unofficial list at Pearl Studios to see if we could potentially be seen. And I sang 8 bars of music. I think I sang Journey to the Past. So the last 8 bars of Journey to the Past, because I thought I was being smart, not singing an actual Disney song, but in the style of, little did I know that every other girl was probably singing the exact same song, but I was 18 at the time, so I didn't know better. And from there they said, can you come back and dance at 3 o'clock? And it was just like this light bulb effect of, I'm doing this. And this is the big leagues for me. This is your first experience auditioning for a national tour. And I came back, and from there, I continued to audition. I think I had about 9 callbacks within the next year of being at school. And it was just a matter of a track opening up. And by the end of my sophomore year, I got a phone call from the casting director saying that they wanted to offer me a role. And I was then faced with the difficult decision of, well, should I be leaving school going into my junior year? Should I be going on this tour? And I spoke to the casting director, who is also affiliated with Pace. And I hadn't had him as a professor yet. And I said, Bob, this is Bob Klein, was the casting director. And I said, what should I do? And he goes, well, the show is going to be around for only so long, but school will always be there. So you have to snatch opportunities when they present themselves. And I was cast as the Belle understudy, and I was a dancing spork and napkin, and talk about Beauty and the Beast University and being a 20-year-old growing up on a national tour, and again, asserting that responsibility and stepping up to the plate and proving yourself night after night. And it was probably the type of training that I didn't know I needed. And if I would look back at Jill at 20 years old to the end of the year and being a 21-year-old, it was just, there was nothing like that experience. I mean, I met some of the most wonderful humans and friends, and it's just one of those things that changed my life for the better. So
I'm sure. So before we jump into Sound of Music, which was obviously a national tour, speaking of Beauty and the Beast, what was that like being on your first national tour? Like what were the challenges? What was so exciting about it? It's always been my dream to be on a national tour because it just seems like such a blast.
Yeah. And such a well-received show. I mean, sold
Right.
out audiences night after night, which doesn't always happen for some
Mm-hmm.
tours. Little girls dressed up in belle dresses, little boys dressed up in belle dresses. I mean, everyone came to see their favorite Disney heroine. And it was just one of those shows that I knew I wanted to be a part of. I actually had played Belle in high school for my sophomore year spring musical. And so when the tour came around, it was a no-brainer that I was like, well, I'm meant, somewhere in me, I knew I was meant to do that. And it was just a matter of time, callback after callback, and working one-on-one with the director. I felt like I was in rehearsals and was like preparing myself for this time. And the rehearsal process for that was about 2 weeks in New York City. The blisters that I had, the aches and pains in my muscles of how hard we were working, it paid off, and it was all worth it for sure. And as far as, you know, the responsibility of an understudy, it's a little daunting, and there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
The first time I went on for Belle, I had never rehearsed Act 1. So that watching and waiting in the wings and watching our Belle, she really taught me a lot from the wings and watching the monitors and just being like, okay, so here she moves on to this mark at this point, but also the artistry of the role and making sure you're conveying to the audience who this character is and what she stands for. I got the call at about 7 a.m. after a very rough travel day that we had been having. We ran into snowstorms. Our bus got into a little bit of an accident. Everybody was okay. But it was about that time in the winter where people were falling under the weather and needed to be smart and taking care of themselves. And our Belle had called out of the show for that day. And I got the call from my stage manager standing in a hotel lobby waiting to get on the bus to drive another 2 hours to get to the venue to perform. And I remember I was told not to tell anyone, and they would announce it at company meeting, and I was on the bus with our dance captain going through the show, and because I had never again rehearsed Act 1, but there was something in me that just felt ready, and I had done my homework and had prepared myself to the best of my ability, because when someone is out of the show, it's usually not a good thing, right? Someone is ill, something has happened, there may have been a death in the family for whatever reason, and thankfully it was just mildly under the weather. Let's try to nip this in the bud and get back in the show. So it was an easy thing to be like, okay, the stakes are low for that. Now we can take care of the show and move forward, and let's really live in this moment. And I actually got a phone call minutes before going on stage from the director, and he said, do you have any questions? How do you feel? And we did work with the original Broadway creative team, so there was a lot of insight, and we were doing certain motions or poses that would happen throughout the show, or marks that we had to hit. I was doing, knowing that Susan Egan, who originated the role on Broadway how many years ago, had also done those moves. So, and also Beauty and the Beast was the first show that I saw on Broadway. So it was really surreal for me to then be like, I'm doing this. And when my director called, he said, you know, of all the women that have played this role on the national tours or on Broadway, I just want you to know you are your own kind of history in this moment. You are the youngest Belle we've ever had to play Belle. And I remember just getting so misty-eyed, full of pride and also like a sense of responsibility again, and just was thankful for my teachers and the people that prepared me for this moment, and the cast that was supporting me. And I also knew in that moment it wasn't about me anymore. It was about taking care of this show and being the leader. And that was a responsibility I had never had before to that caliber. And something in me just stepped on stage, and it happened. I mean, there was some little like tunnel vision, Twilight Zone moments, but we got through it. And I just remember at one point I had just sung Home, and Mrs. Potts comes on stage, and I'm doing this scene, and for the first time I hear her address me as Belle, And I got this kind of goofy grin on my face because I was like, that's me. I'm her. What? And kind of sensed that too. And we continued on, and you know, it happened. And I was very grateful for the opportunity. And ironically, I did go on a few other times throughout the year after, but ironically, some sort of Disney magic happened where I knew someone in the audience each performance unknowingly.
Wow.
The parents of one of my father's coworkers was there because they lived in that city and they had tickets to see the show, and they're like, Jill Wiley, isn't that Keith Wiley's daughter? And so it just kind of happened that way. And I had friends that had come seen the show another time that I had gotten them tickets last minute, and finding out a few hours after that I was going on, and I didn't tell them, and it was just exciting when they heard the announcement for the first time. So it was quite an amazing experience, and it's just irreplaceable, you know. It's memories that shape you.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I'm sure it just strengthens you so much as an actress as well.
Yes, sure. A lot of lessons learned too, for sure. I mean,
absolutely,
it grooms you to be prepared for this industry, and anything can happen in live theater.
So shortly after, or however long after, you were found for 2 years where the hills are alive with The Sound of Music. How long after Beauty and the Beast was that?
Well, there's an interesting gap where I took a look at my resume and thought, this currently reads ensemble understudy cover. And I knew personally from my background and experience that longevity, I didn't think that's where I wanted my career to be. I didn't feel that I was as strong of a dancer as some of the other girls that I was with. I mean, I really had to work hard. I was in brush up rehearsals before or after and was beating myself up. And I was worried about injuring myself in the long run because I saw myself as a strong lead who sings and acts that can dance well, not I am a dancer, you know, you kind of categorize yourselves in different ways. And I knew who I was in that industry and where I wanted my career to go. And it was a year after Beauty and the Beast till I actually booked work. And I went a full year with no theatrical employment. I was nannying in New York City and auditioning and trying to take class and fulfill my artistry in whatever way I could. And I had booked regional work. So I was offered another Disney princess. I played Ariel in Disney's The Little Mermaid. And from that theater, I worked at Arizona Broadway Theater in Phoenix, Arizona. From there, I played Carrie Pipperidge in Carousel, which is my second, I guess, but first adulthood Rodgers and Hammerstein show to work through. And then I played Belle again at Arizona Broadway. So I had the opportunity to assume the role of Belle for a regional contract. And in building my resume, and major kudos to this theater who, you know, gave me the opportunity time and time again to come back as a leading lady or supporting lead. I truly feel it prepared myself in those about 5 years span since I had left Beauty and the Beast tour to auditioning for The Sound of Music. And I had been searching for representation. I have a manager now, and through him, I was able to get an audition for the Sound of Music national tour. And I had thought I was a Liesel, and I was very wrong. And so I was like, Maria, oh my goodness. Okay, here we go. She is the girl to be. And I had about 5 callbacks for that role, and including some work sessions with the creative team. And my final producer callback for that was in the spring of 2017. And I didn't think I got it. I had been auditioning for the Love Never Dies national tour, Phantom of the Opera national tour, and Gentleman's Guide, all in the same week. And by the time Sound of Music rolled around, I was so vocally fatigued that I was, here we go. But I didn't think that I got it. And little did I know that they even had nicknamed me in the audition process. They called me Shoeless Jill, because every time I came into this audition, I just knew that I knew who I was after establishing my resume a bit more, and I just wanted to take chances. And I knew that if I was going to get this role, that I had to be completely and utterly myself and fully, transparent what I would do with the role. And so I kicked my shoes off and I sang and danced around barefoot every time I sang Sound of Music. And I would slip my shoes back on for the scene work to more put together versions. And they called me Shoeless Jill, and something about that was, I guess, endearing.
Yeah.
And
But that's something Maria would do too.
It is something Maria will do. Well, and then, this song is, I think singing The Sound of Music is just as hard as singing the national anthem.
Yeah.
It's very meditative, and it's not necessarily as dramatic as sometimes it can be perceived to be. And also to follow up Julie Andrews and the other iconic women who have played the role on Broadway before me. And I was now one of 3 of the women who have played the role on the tour. So there was a lot of expectation to live up to. So I knew I had to be as organic as possible and just fully me. And something about that resonated with the director, and I was their girl, and I was really grateful to be. So we started rehearsals in the summer, and I had been going off earlier in the summer to do Disney's Beauty and the Beast, and then I had about a week off, and I then started rehearsals in New York for 2-3 weeks, and then we were off to Washington, the state of Washington, and Yakima, Washington, to tech the show for a week and have previews before we opened at the Paramount in Seattle for an unbelievable week that I could never have dreamt of opening a national tour as a leading lady. I mean, talk about spectacular and just incredible. And it was just one of those opportunities that as an actor is rare. When I was sitting, I had gotten the call, and I was sitting in my living room with my boyfriend, and I was packing for a summer show. And then he kind of said to me, Jill, you will have a week between contracts, and for the next 18 months or so, or 14 months, you're employed as an actor. And I thought, I'm never going to have to be a nanny again. Funny joke is I got to play a governess to 7 children on the national tour. So it was a very kind of just, this is happening, surreal moment. You have to celebrate those moments. I think we as actors sometimes forget to do that. And they're worth celebrating for sure. So
that's amazing. And I think a lot of audiences may not realize. You mentioned you were in rehearsal for 3 weeks, and that's about the right amount from a lot of shows. It's always crazy to me how a show can be put together and perfected in such a short amount of time, and then just kind of being thrusted on stage for opening night to do it. And of course you have Tech Week, which is a whole other thing in itself, which is kind of just long and, in my opinion, dreadful. But
they say tech is fun, and it's the opportunity to find how many ways things may or may not work. And as Maria, I think we ended up clocking it in the second year of the tour that I had done on the second leg. And I think I had about 18 minutes to 20 minutes that was time off stage. And it's all but a 3-hour-long show. So imagine that drawn out in the tech process. But I said this in interviews time and time again. I mean, what do you do when you're tired or things are, nerves are a bit fried? And I always said, and will continue to do so, to look to the children, because they're in school full time. I've been there. I can relate to them on that aspect. I've been in their shoes. And it was just one of those things. Well, if they're tired, if I'm tired, I can only imagine how tired they are. Right. And I would use them as motivation. And when I would see them fading, I remember very vividly in Tech Week, we're in the midst of the Lonely Goatherd scene, which is the pajama scene. They're in Maria's bedroom and there's a thunderstorm. It's a little out of context from the movie, but in the original Broadway production, that's where the song fit into place, and it works beautifully. And they were all just sitting on the bed staring into space. And I was like, we need to get them activated again. And as Maria would have, let's play a game. And I remember we're going on a trip, and I'm going to bring a picnic basket, and I'm going to bring on Landon, who played Friedrich. And I said, Landon, what are you bringing on our picnic? And it just kind of woke up their imagination, and on we went. So not only was I trying to entertain the children, but also keep myself moving and grooving. So it was a process for sure, but memories that I'm not in a hurry to forget for sure. So it was worth
Right.
it in the long run.
They always say that to never work with animals or children, and you worked with quite a bit of children over those 2 years. So what was that like? Because I mean, I think chemistry is everything, and the chemistry you had with the children was undeniable. So what was it like working with the kids?
Well, it was different with each group. We had 3 sets of children in the 2 years, and children grow. And so you become a family, and especially the first year, it was my first experience with the tour. So I had a very special bond with my first group of kids that I was with. And when they grew and it was time to move on to the other chapters, and it was really hard to see them go. And I remember meeting our new children, and there was something so special about them that you connected with them in a different way. And you had to recognize that the relationships weren't going to be the same. And you really had to take the time to create those individual relationships with each child. And also the important factor of they are your coworkers, and creating that fine line. You know, I am an aunt to 2 awesome kids that are around the same age of the Von Trapp children that I was working with, but I did have to create that barrier of when we're at work, we are at work. And when I have a job to do, I can't be off in the wings goofing around with the kids. They had a child wrangler. So respecting them and their need to be professional actors, but also giving them love and support, and remembering that they are kids. And sometimes Gretel is really tired and needs you to pick her up and give her a hug to get on stage, or moments of the kids are really teary-eyed because it's their last week of shows and they have to leave. And how do we navigate to bring it to full energy and as if nothing is potentially wrong or heartbreaking in that moment? And it created some really wonderful moments on stage. And we've had a few hiccups from time to time, and we've been able to laugh at it and hopefully not breaking on stage too many times. But all in all, these kids, they taught me so much about who I am as an actor and as a human, the type of mom that I want to be one day. And you know, I'm still in touch with a lot of the kids today, or I follow them on Instagram and I check in from time to time, and they're all very good kids with very wonderful families, and they were all very deserving of the opportunity. So it teaches you a lot as an adult and actor, and to have patience and appreciation, but also having come from being a Von Trapp child once upon a time, I could very easily relate with them. And it was very important for me to have those individual relationships and handshakes with the boys if that's what we needed, and girl time and hair braiding and all that good stuff. And there is one moment we were on a travel day, and I said to the moms, I said, "Moms, go get lunch." We had a layover. I said, "I'm taking the kids. We're going to have lunch. We're going to have a picnic." And I hung out with all the kids. So finding the time to be with them and interacting them was very important for me.
And I think that's incredible, because I don't know that a lot of actors or actresses would have taken the amount of time that you did to connect with the kids. When I had mentioned doing the full Monty, I wanted to share this with you. The actor who played my father, his name was Larry Buzzio, and I was 11, and so I'm about to turn 24 next week, and we're still in touch to this day. I'm a writer and director as well, and I did a feature film that I wrote, directed, and starred in. And I knew that I wanted him to play my father, so I reached out to him, and we worked that out. He lives about 5 hours away, but we worked it out for him to come be involved in the film. He got to play my father, and I hadn't seen him since I was 11. We've always just communicated via phone calls or Facebook, Instagram, stuff like that. That chemistry was still there. So I know how important he has been in my life. So I definitely just wanted to take the time to tell you, I hope you realize how important you are to each one of those kids' lives.
Thank you. They're important to me too. I mean,
absolutely.
They're the future of this industry. I was one of those kids, and it's important. It's important to mentor them and to nurture them and to show them what being a professional is all about, because they are talented and they're on their way for sure.
So when you were a Von Trapp kid, you're Maria. Did she have the opportunity to see you on as Maria?
She did. Where did she see? I mean, 2 years, a lot of venues.
Yeah.
I believe she did see it. There's actually a photo early on in the process, and this was another surreal moment for me. I was contacted in our week of rehearsals, and they asked me, "Hey, you're going to go to Broadway.com headquarters, and you're going to film a music video." And I thought, well, that's what Broadway people do, and I'm nobody. That was the last time I thought of myself as a nobody. I think it's really important to be like, no, I am somebody.
Yeah.
I am Jill Christine-Wiley, and I am performing on the Sound of Music, and giving yourself that credit and acknowledgement, not high and mighty, but giving yourself the credit. And there is a photo that her daughter took of her watching that music video, and just crying, and just the sense of pride that she had, and her being my very first voice teacher when I was a young child. And our families are still in touch to this day. And so I think it was really, really special that she was able to be there. And I've had a lot of mentors in my life, and all who were able to get to see the show. And if it was coming to a nearby town, I would reach out to them and say, if they have kids, can you get a babysitter? I will get you a ticket. I want you in the audience, because it's important for me to give you this thank you in the form of a performance. So it's a really special opportunity to have that. So.
And since you mentioned Broadway World, I think it's important to say that you won a Broadway World Award.
I did, yeah. It was,
which is amazing.
And well, I think the more incredible factor is the women that I was nominated with.
Right.
We're talking big Broadway names on national tours, and the fact that I was recognized in Seattle, which is also a very big theatrical city, was something pretty remarkable. And it's one of those things where you don't have a trophy, but you just know that it's there, and the people that you are nominated with, it kind of creates the impossible to be the impossible of things that you didn't realize would be something for you. So it keeps you charged and going for sure.
It's something to be very proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. We are. My mom and dad are. So that makes
awesome. So after 2 years of being in Sound of Music, it came to a close. So what was that night like? What was closing night like for you?
Well, the official closing of our tour and saying so long farewell was a bittersweet one. I did about 467 performances. I can't tell you how many times I did do re mi, or those high notes at the end, and the solfege, but it was one of those of being prepared and ready for it. I would miss the cast. I was ready to not be living out of a suitcase for the last 2 years. I have an apartment in New York City, and I have a dog, so I was ready to be back in my life and reconnect with family and friends and loved ones. And so that aspect I was ready. But the show, I mean, if you asked me to go and re-up with the tour tomorrow, I mean, I would say, great, what city am I landing in? You know, I am just so inspired by the music of Rodgers and Hammerstein and the story and this message, and it is so relevant today. So closing night, we actually closed in Toronto, and the audiences were amazing. Everybody was just giving it their all and all of their heart. And you could tell there was a shift in the performances of, we're really taking this in. And 400 some performances later, you never think that you would hear a line differently, but you do. And it resonates with you and the audience in a different way, and the response that you're getting from them. We had a lovely closing night party, and we were able to celebrate with our creative team and really kind of go out with a bang. And it was a very tearful plane ride home for me. And I just really focused on living in the moment and cherishing it, and coming out to the stage door of the 7 Von Trapplings, I think we had more than 7, because we had some wonderful understudies too. Just crying, and this giant group hug. It's moments that I won't forget in a hurry, for sure. So,
well, I hope I have the opportunity to see you as Maria again. I think
Thank you. I hope so too.
I'm sure it'll end up, being revived on Broadway at some point. It's been quite a while, and I would love to see you in that role on Broadway. I think that'd be incredible.
Thank you. I hope for the opportunity to do so, because I'll tell you what, it is a show that teaches you the type of person that you want to be. And
yeah,
the line that I spoke to Liesl in the second act, I now know how to spend my love. It's kind of the message of the show. How do we spend our love, and the love of music, the love of family, of a father and his children, and finding new love after the loss of love. I mean, it's a remarkable story, and not to mention the political aspect and how relevant it is in today's world. And Sound of Music, for so many people, it's their first theatrical experience, or for some their last. And for me, it was my first, and look where I am now. I mean, it's one of those things that can lead you into this industry, and it has a very important message, for sure.
So being out of it almost a year now, right? Just about a year.
Easy enough, yes.
But do you find yourself driving around singing some of the songs that just pop up in your head, or are they still there?
I was getting ready the other morning, and randomly Lonely Goatherd was a very speech text heavy song, yodeling, and I found myself in my head, like, as I was singing it, I still remember the blocking, which is I go, maybe because it was so invested that you wouldn't. And Sound of Music was always the hardest song for me to sing, because it was very involved, and that is how the first time we see Maria, and so it was a very big responsibility for me. And I thought at the end, I think I'll be okay if I don't sing this song for a little while, because it was very high stakes and I put a lot of pressure on myself. And now I find myself just reminiscing and singing it around the house and having this appreciation for it. And I'm really good friends with a lot of my castmates, and getting together with them is always really special from time to time. So that's our opportunity to reminisce. And I sometimes spiral down through the photos and just thinking of memories. And I'm actually just now in quarantine getting around to writing out my journal and going through moments that I don't want to forget, and hopefully share with my kids one day. So
that's amazing. So you were set to play I forget who, I read it but I don't remember who you were going to be in Titanic there in your hometown.
So I mean, I've worked at regional and community theaters in Lancaster, and in my teenage years child through teenage years, I was a working actor and performing in understudy roles and at the Fulton Theater. And the last show I had done at the Fulton was actually The Sound of Music, where I understudied Liesl. And then I went off to college. And based on the theater gods and where it led me, it just hasn't led me back to the Fulton until this time. And what a relevant show and message, sail on in today's current situation that we are all in with COVID-19. We would have been getting ready to close up the show about this time. So I was planning on coming home to start rehearsals. And then in the time that I had come home, they had to postpone the shows. The theater doors were closed. And it was heartbreaking, but hearts were breaking everywhere. So I understood, and I was hopeful that we can reschedule till later. And so as of now, the show is rescheduled for the fall, September, October timeframe. And we're keeping our fingers crossed and are hopeful that everyone is safe and things are on the upswing to do so. I was to play multiple roles. We were going to be doing the ensemble edition of the show. And this is a show that is, it has been trying to be revived on Broadway for many years now. Every season we hear buzz of it, and I think it is long overdue. So I was really looking forward to what the Fulton was going to be doing with it. I am playing Murphy, Domingo. So I would be a dancing role at one point. I'm playing one of the 3 Irish third-class passenger girls, and all over the place, really. But because it is an ensemble version, in listening to the score and looking at the original Broadway team and the cast members, I go, oh, this is a show full of leads. And and it just creates a whole new version of what an ensemble is. And so I feel it's going to be one glorious entr'acte when the theaters are open and we are in front of an audience there. It's probably going to be, and I'm hoping that it is, one of those experiences that is going to be just irreplaceable. I mean, I'm very much so looking forward to it and being a part of that company. And I don't know how I will react when I walk out on that stage for the first time. And in this industry, you make a lot of friends and you are revisited with the opportunity to work with some of the same people again. So I'm looking forward to going into this contract with a few friends that I have made outside of this show, in other productions of different endeavors. And it's going to be a really wonderful thing to be able to have friends and family and mentors and past teachers in the audience for the first time in a long while. So that's something pretty special, and I'm very excited for when that happens.
I can only imagine how electric that, not even the first night, how the entire run's going to be, because you all were in this together. You all got the devastating news. You all are playing the waiting game, and I can only imagine how all of you are going to connect once you're all back together, and I'm sure it's just lifelong. You guys will all be lifelong friends.
There's a shift, and there's this appreciation even more for what we do. And certain Broadway shows, it's devastating where that their show will not reopen, or they've made the announcement, or certain people were supposed to make their Broadway debuts that night, or national tours have closed. And thinking of if this had happened when I was on Sound of Music, and then to know that I wasn't able to go back to be my cast, my tour family. You just never know when it is your last performance. And it really gives you that appreciation of, I value this and I am taking this on with a whole new perspective. And I've recently been doing a lot of online cabaret participation in theaters that I've worked at in the past, and reconnecting with these souls that are just so wonderful humans and distant family now, that I just go, I need to go back there and work again. And I hope that when the theaters are open, that we need to get over there and we need to get back in this theater, and however way that they'll have me. It's a deep appreciation for sure.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Philip Boykin, from his days at the Show Palace here in Florida, he was traveling in the national tour of Once on This Island. He did the Broadway production, and then he played Tauntaun, and I just went, because that show ended up, the rest of the run is just canceled. And just how devastated he was heartbreaking, especially because that show is such a beautiful show, such an important show. My heart broke for him.
Absolutely. And I had friends on that show, both behind the scenes and on stage, and just how special the show was to them, and how amazing of an achievement it was to be cast in the Broadway National Tour. And I saw the show on Broadway twice. I went back a second time because it is such a celebration. It's such a beautiful message. And it's hard when audiences are unfortunately deprived of the opportunity to be in the houses to see these shows. But
and I think, because I was supposed to go to New York to see, I love Dear Evan Hansen. It's one of my favorite shows on Broadway right now. I was going to go see Jordan Fisher as Evan Hansen, and I couldn't go see it, and I just based on his schedule, I'm sure he probably won't be rejoining the cast as it opens. But it's just so heartbreaking to see all these actors maybe miss out on roles they're supposed to take, or the run's cut short. But I think it's a reminder to be, to live in the moment, as you said before, and just be grateful and happy for where you are. I just think it's an amazing reminder of all of that.
It's a sense of camaraderie. I mean, we all know what each other is going through, and so we're lifting each other up and supporting each other, and just kind of taking it day by day as we can, and knowing that it will be a process in getting back up on our feet, but we will. And eventually those theaters are going to be filled, and we won't ever take it for granted again. I don't think. I think this has been a very big wake-up call for a lot of us. And we are forced to be creative in other ways, and outlets, and connecting with people. And And I think it's a really important time, and it's a very difficult situation to go through, but good will come from this. And we will be back again at some point when the time is allowed.
Right. So throughout this discussion we've had, I feel like I've realized something. I wrote a short film that I feel like you'd be perfect for. So off camera, I think I need to talk to you and get in touch with your manager about that for when all this is over with. Takes place in New York, so that'd be I think you'd be wonderful for it.
I am there. So and this is the awesome thing where it's artists connecting and sharing their projects and collaborating. I mean, it's a pretty awesome network that we have of people. So
absolutely. So I did skip ahead of something that I meant to talk about, so we can just talk about it quickly. But you've had the opportunity to teach some master classes, and what are some things that you really enjoy about teaching?
Oh, it's like an electric charge for me of creativity in a different way, and it creates this opportunity, kind of selfishly for me, of I've never thought about this in this way for myself. And then when I go to attack material, it's very different. I love working with students. I love working with people of all ages and backgrounds and involvement in the arts, whether it's their first class and they are nervous as all get out to they are a seasoned pro and you can tell. Right. There's nothing better than helping a young artist in their journey and helping them discover their material on their own and just sort of helping guide them. It's such a rewarding experience on all levels. And it's just something that I love to do. I've had young artists reach out to me on social media from time to time asking me if I could coach them on their college auditions. And that to me is just honestly an honor that they feel that I would be someone to help them. And I've had so many wonderful teachers and mentors in the past that have helped be the stepping stones to get me to where I am today. So it feels like paying it forward to the next group of artists out there. And I always tell them, it's not about us. It's bigger than us. And it's so important to continue to lift each other up and to help each other discover, because at the end of the day, we're not competing against each other. We are competing against our best selves. And it's a really wonderful experience to just be able to share what I've learned with them and for them to take that and mold it to help them in their next journey and their next chapter.
I'm sure your parents are incredibly proud of everything you've accomplished, but I can only imagine how proud your father feels as a teacher himself to then see you, kind of take that on and teach yourself. And I can only imagine that's how amazing that is for him.
For sure. And I am very fortunate to have two very wonderful and supportive, loving parents. Not everyone in our industry has that. Right. And I know that it can be difficult at times for people to financially be able to afford funding for classes that they want to take, or trying to make ends meet. And sometimes they end up not being able to, I can't even audition because how am I supposed to pay my rent if I can't work? And how am I supposed to call off on my shift because I'll lose my job? And I have financially supported myself for many years, but I know that my parents are always there to say, are you doing okay? Do you need help? We've got you. If you fall, we will push you back upward if need be. On so many different levels of just phone calls of, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And just this support system of like, we're in your cheering crowd and we know that you can because you have, and you need to keep soldiering on and get through this because you will. So I'm very, very fortunate to have my parents and to have been raised in a musical family as well.
Yeah, that's truly beautiful. So before we wrap it up, I guess I'll just ask, what advice would you have for any aspiring actors, actresses who maybe they don't fully believe in themselves, or maybe they're like questioning whether or not they could even do it? What advice would you give to them?
Boy, I would tell them, that you will make mistakes. You will fail from time to time. Things won't go your way. And that is part of this industry. And that is something that we have to be ready to work through. I don't think we will ever, ever not be in a place where, you know, we've figured out the magic recipe of success in this industry. But I know that kindness, genuine kindness, gets you a long way, and people want to work with good, genuine people. And sometimes the person that you know you don't have a good rapport with gets the role, and you're like, but I'm more talented than her, or gosh, this person is not the nicest human being. Hang tight. The universe has a way of working things out. There are so many outlets and opportunities to be involved in this industry, whether it is on or off stage. And people will always remember how you treated them. And that will lead to people wanting to work with you. The amount of times that I've gone into an audition and I feel that I've booked a role because a previous director of mine has been brought up, and you want people to not only be singing your praises, but to say, this is a good person you want to work. Trust me, you want to work with this person. And again, you know, as I said, we will make mistakes, but that's how we learn, and that's how we grow and we get better in our artistry. And I have, of course, made my fair share of mistakes, and will probably make a few more, have a few bumps along the way. But it really teaches you who you want to be in this industry, and to put your best foot forward, and to always be growing and learning, and knowing that that's never done. You know, it's a process. As artists, we are always striving for better, but I think we should be striving to just continue to grow rather than being the very best version. We need to continue to strive to be growing in a whole, and knowing that it is a journey and it's a process, and kindness will get you a long way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for offering your advice, and thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, and hope you had a lot of fun.
I did.
I had a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope whatever word vomit came out of my mouth, someone can take away and use to their advantage, and help them see wherever the direction they need to go.
Well, I'm sure you inspired and motivated a lot of people. I know you inspired and motivated me. So this was great. This was truly great.
Well, thank you very much, LJ, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely, and you as well. All right, guys. So that is another episode of Starving Artist. You know, everybody give Jill a round of applause from home, and we'll see you guys next week.